3 weeks of complete silence changed my life forever, not because I lost my hearing, but because I got it back. The moment it returned, everything sounded too loud. The steady beep of the heart monitor, the scratch of a pen against paper, the soft hum of fluorescent lights above my hospital bed. After weeks of nothing, it felt like the world rushed back in all at once. The doctor smiled and said my hearing had fully recovered. No permanent damage, no limitations. I nodded, barely listening to her explanation. All I could think about was my daughter. I couldn't wait to go home. She had moved into my house while I was in the hospital, said she wanted to help, said she was worried about me living alone after the accident. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my daughter, the one I paid through college, the one I helped after her divorce, the one I welcomed back into my home without hesitation. I didn't tell her my hearing had returned, not at first. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe caution, or maybe something in me already sensed that silence could be useful. When I pulled into my driveway that afternoon, I sat in my car for a moment, listening. Birds in the trees, a lawnmower down the street, the familiar sounds of the neighborhood I lived in for 30 years. My house looked the same, but something felt off. I opened the front door quietly, and that's when I heard it. She's finally back from the hospital. That old burden. I froze in the hallway. The voice was unmistakable. My daughter's. For a split second, I told myself I must have misheard, that my brain was still adjusting, that surely she couldn't be talking about me like that. Then her husband laughed. At least the insurance covered most of it. Once this is over, we can finally move forward. My chest tightened. I stood there, invisible, holding my breath while the two people I trusted most spoke freely, believing I couldn't hear a single word. "Sunset Manor isn't cheap," my daughter continued, calm and practical. "But once he's settled there, we can sell the house. The realtor said it could easily clear $400,000. They weren't whispering. They weren't arguing. They were planning. Planning my future like I wasn't even alive. 3 weeks earlier, I was terrified I might never hear again. Now, I wished I was still deaf. But instead of anger, something colder settled in. Clarity. They thought I was weak, confused, helpless, an inconvenience standing between them and the clean financial exit. And they had no idea I could hear every word. I stepped back silently, my heart pounding, and made a decision that would change everything. I would stay quiet. I would keep pretending, and I would let them show me exactly who they really were. Because when people think you can't hear, they tell the truth. And once you hear it, you can never unhear it. Before my hearing failed, before the hospital, before the silence and the betrayal, there was a lifetime of giving. I raised my daughter alone for most of her life. Her mother passed away when she was still young, and from that moment on, I became everything at once: father, provider, problem solver, safety net. I worked 32 years as a senior project engineer. Long days, early mornings, missed vacations, missed birthdays with friends. I wasn't chasing promotions or prestige. I was chasing stability, a paid-off house, a funded retirement, a future where my daughter wouldn't struggle the way her mother and I once had. When she got accepted into college, I didn't hesitate. Tuition, housing, books, meal plans. Over 4 years, it came out to just under $96,000. I cashed out investments I'd planned to keep until retirement. Told myself I could always work a few extra years. When she cried about student loans, I paid them off. $28,000 gone in one transfer. When she got engaged, she wanted a beautiful but simple wedding. That's what she said. The final total came out to $35,000. Venue, catering, dress, photography. I remember signing the check and thinking how proud her mother would have been. After her divorce, she moved back home. Temporarily, she said. I helped with the down payment on an apartment later. $15,000. No contract, no repayment plan. She was my daughter. That was enough. There were smaller things too. Car repairs, medical bills, credit card emergencies, a vacation she really needed after everything she'd been through. Over time, it added up to more than $120,000 beyond the big expenses. I never kept score. I never asked for gratitude. I believed that love meant giving without conditions. That was my mistake. I confused generosity with loyalty. I thought sacrifice would be remembered. I thought years of support would build respect. Instead, it built entitlement. When my hearing accident happened at the construction site, she rushed to the hospital, held my hand, told the doctors she'd take care of everything. I believed her again. She moved into my house to help, took over the guest room, brought her husband with her, said it made sense to stay together. I didn't argue. I was scared, deaf, vulnerable. I didn't realize that to them, my weakness wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. They saw a house worth nearly $450,000, a savings account with $180,000, investments totaling another $120,000. They didn't see 30 years of labor. They didn't see sacrifice. They saw an obstacle. And while I lay in a hospital bed learning to hear again, they were already counting what would be left once I was gone. Looking back now, the signs were there long before my hearing failed. I just didn't want to see them. At first, it was small things, harmless things, I told myself. My daughter stopped asking how I was feeling and started asking what bills needed to be paid. Conversations that once lasted an hour were reduced to quick check-ins, always ending with some practical request. Dad, can you transfer the money today? Dad, the card didn't go through. Dad, well, explain later. It's urgent. She used to sit with me at the kitchen table and talk about her day. Now she stood while talking, phone in hand, eyes drifting toward the screen as if I were a background noise she couldn't quite mute. When her husband moved in, the shift became sharper. He stopped saying thank you after the first week, stopped asking permission altogether. My house slowly became the house. My kitchen became the kitchen. My living room became the living room, as if ownership had already changed hands in their minds. I told myself I was being sensitive, that I was getting older, that I should be grateful they were around. That's what entitlement thrives on. Silence. Excuses. When I asked simple questions, they responded with impatience. When I forgot something small, they exchanged looks. Not worried looks, annoyed ones. She already told you that, Dad. You don't remember? It's fine. Well, handle it. Every sentence carried the same quiet message. You're slipping. We're in charge now. After the accident, when I lost my hearing, their behavior shifted again. On the surface, they became gentler, louder, slower, smiles wider than necessary, notes written with exaggerated care. But beneath that performance, something else crept in: control. They spoke over me instead of to me. They decided what I ate, when I rested, who I spoke to. My questions were dismissed with pats on the shoulder and reassuring nods, like I was a child being humored. I nodded back. Inside, Something was breaking. It wasn't the hearing loss that hurt the most. It was the realization that my usefulness had an expiration date. That once I stopped being the provider, I became a project. A problem to be managed. A cost-benefit calculation. They didn't hate me. Hate would have required emotion. They had moved past that. I was simply inconvenient. And I still told myself it was temporary. That once I recovered, things would go back to normal. That family loyalty still meant something. I was wrong. What I thought was care was supervision. What I thought was concern was preparation. What I thought was love was tolerance. And the cracks were about to split wide open. The moment that broke me didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, in my own hallway, when the people closest to me believed I couldn't hear. After I left the kitchen that first day, I didn't go upstairs to rest. Instead, I stopped halfway down the hall, pressed myself against the wall, and listened. Every sound was sharp. Every word was clear. "Sunset Manor has availability," my daughter said casually, like she was talking about a restaurant reservation. "It's not cheap, but Medicare should cover most of it once we get the right diagnosis." Her husband chuckled. "Once he's there, this place is ours. We renovate, sell, and finally get out of this mess. My house, the house I paid off 20 years ago, the house where my wife took her last breath, the house I was standing in at that exact moment." They talked numbers next, not emotions, not guilt, just math. "If we sell for around $470," she continued, "after the mortgage payoff, we're walking away with over $300,000, enough for a down payment in Whitefish." Whitefish. They weren't planning to take care of me. They were planning to erase me. Then came the part that made my hands start shaking. "Well, need paperwork," her husband said. "Something official. Incompetence. Memory issues. Confusion." My daughter didn't hesitate. "Dr. Henderson owes me a favor. Hell, write whatever evaluation we need. Dementia, early onset, whatever fits." I felt something inside me collapse. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't caregiver burnout. This was premeditated. They weren't reacting to my weakness. They were exploiting it. I stood there listening as they discussed timelines, documentation, and how long it would take to establish a pattern. They talked about me like a malfunctioning appliance that needed replacing. Not once did they ask what I wanted. Not once did they sound conflicted. Not once did my daughter defend me. And then she said the words that sealed it. "He won't fight it," she said confidently. "He can't even hear us. He just nods and smiles." That was it. In that moment, I understood the full truth. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I wasn't dealing with stress. I was dealing with betrayal. Cold, calculated, complete. I wanted to confront them right then, to step into the kitchen and let them see my face when I told them I could hear everything. But I didn't, because something stronger than anger took over. Patience. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was already defeated. They thought they had time. They were wrong. I stepped back into my bedroom, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was racing, but my mind was suddenly clear. They had just shown me exactly who they were, and now they were going to show me how far they were willing to go. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound in the house. Cabinets opening, footsteps pacing, whispered conversations drifting through the vents. They thought silence was my weakness. It wasn't. It was my advantage. For the first time since my wife died, I stopped defending my daughter in my head. I stopped explaining away her behavior. I stopped blaming myself for raising her wrong. The truth was simpler and uglier. She wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't acting out of love. She was acting out of entitlement. And entitlement only exists when it's been fed for years. Sometime around 3 a.m, something shifted inside me. The fear drained away, replaced by something steady and focused. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. At dawn, while they were still asleep, I made my first call. My son. He lives in Seattle. Different life, different values. He calls once a week, visits when he can. I never resented that. He built his own life without leaning on me financially. I always respected that. When he answered, I spoke quietly. Son, I need you to listen very carefully. He was confused at first. He thought my hearing was still gone. When I told him the truth, there was a long pause on the line. Then I told him everything, every word I'd heard, every plan, every number they'd discussed, as if my life were already over. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, his voice was tight. Dad, this isn't just betrayal. This is abuse. That word landed hard. Abuse. I had spent years thinking abuse only looked like shouting or fists. I didn't recognize it when it came dressed as concern and smiles. I changed my will today, I told him. Everything goes to you. Another pause. I didn't do it to punish her, I continued. I did it to protect myself. You did the right thing, he said, and you're not alone anymore. That mattered more than I expected. Later that morning, I made my second call, my lawyer. He'd handled my wife's estate years ago, a careful man, thorough, calm, the kind who listens more than he speaks. I told him one thing. I need control back. By noon, my new will was signed, witnessed, and filed. My daughter was reduced to a symbolic inheritance, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. As I drove home, something almost resembling peace settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. They thought I was confused. They had no idea how deliberate every move now was. When I walked back into the house, I slipped the copy of the will onto the kitchen counter, right where it couldn't be missed. Then I sat down in my chair, picked up the newspaper, and waited. Because the trap was set, and all I had to do now was let them walk into it. For the next 2 days, I became invisible. I played my role perfectly. I nodded when spoken to. I smiled when they wrote notes for me. I pointed at my ears and shrugged when they asked questions, letting them believe my silence meant confusion. Inside, I was documenting everything. Every conversation, every timeline, every careless word they said, because they believed I was powerless. They spoke freely in my house, at the kitchen table, in the living room, on the phone. They discussed doctors, paperwork, and strategies like seasoned professionals. Not once did they lower their voices enough to hide the truth. Friday morning, my daughter said at one point, 10 o'clock, Henderson will do the evaluation here. Familiar environment makes it easier to justify the diagnosis. Her husband agreed. Once it's official, the rest is simple. We contest the will. He won't even remember signing it. I listened from the hallway, memorizing every detail. I learned that Sunset Manor cost $4,800 a month, that they expected Medicare to handle most of it, that my house was already mentally listed at $470,000. They weren't guessing. They were budgeting. While they planned, I prepared. I removed my daughter as my emergency contact. I updated my medical directives. I secured copies of financial records and placed them where they could be accessed quickly if needed. Most importantly, I stayed quiet. Silence makes people reckless. They grew bolder by the hour, more confident. They spoke about me in the past tense even while I sat 10 feet away. "He's not suspicious," my daughter told her husband one evening. "He barely knows what day it is." That night, I slept better than I had since the accident, because the trap was working. On the third day, while they were out shopping, I took my final step. I packed. Not my things. Theirs. Every item they brought into my home went into 2 suitcases. Clothes, electronics, documents, accessories they bought with money they assumed would always be available. I placed the suitcases in the center of the living room. Impossible to ignore. Then I sat down in my chair and waited. They thought I was preparing to leave. They thought the plan had succeeded. They thought they had won. What they didn't realize was that entitlement always overplays its hand. And when it does, the fall is sudden. They came home that afternoon in high spirits. I could hear it the moment their car pulled into the driveway. Laughter, relaxed voices, the sound of shopping bags sliding across the floor when they stepped inside. "What the hell?" her husband said. I kept my eyes on the newspaper, just barely lowering it enough to watch without being obvious. The moment they saw the suitcases, everything changed. For a split second, confusion flashed across their faces, then relief, then something far uglier. "Oh my God!" My daughter laughed. Chris. "He finally packed." Her husband grinned. "So it's happening. He's giving up." They didn't look at me. Not really. They looked at the suitcases like a lottery ticket that had finally paid out. "We don't even have to push him now," she said, excitement creeping into her voice. "No nursing home fight. No evaluations. He's doing it for us." They were celebrating in my living room over what they believed was my quiet surrender. They talked openly now, careless in their victory. "We can start renovations next week," her husband said. "I'll call that contractor in Whitefish." My daughter nodded enthusiastically. "We'll finally have our own place. No more pretending, no more waiting for me to disappear." I watched them stand there, smiling, already living a future funded by my life's work. They didn't see a father in that chair. They saw an obstacle finally stepping aside. Entitlement does that. It convinces people they deserve outcomes they didn't earn. It makes them arrogant, loud, sloppy. They thought the game was over. They thought they had won. My daughter turned toward me, forcing concern back onto her face like a mask. "Dad," she said loudly, too loudly, "are you okay? We found your bags." I folded the newspaper carefully and placed it on the arm of the chair. Then I looked straight at her, and I spoke. "No," I said calmly, "you're the ones leaving my house." The room went completely still. My daughter's smile collapsed like glass shattering in slow motion. Her husband took an unconscious step backward, his confidence evaporating as quickly as it had appeared. "Dad," she whispered, "did you just hear that?" I stood up from my chair, steady, deliberate, every movement controlled. "I heard everything," I said, "every word, every plan, every number. Her eyes widened in horror. Her husband's face drained of color. "How long?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Since the day I came home from the hospital," I replied. "My hearing returned. I chose not to tell you." Silence pressed down on the room. "You knew?" my daughter said. "You knew all this time?" "Yes." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like someone trying to process gravity after stepping off a cliff. "You heard us talk about Sunset Manor?" she asked. "Yes." "About the house?" her husband added, barely audible. "Yes." "And the doctor?" she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. "I heard you plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. I heard you discuss forging medical evaluations. I heard you celebrate the idea of selling my home while I was still alive." Her knees buckled. She dropped down in front of me, grabbing my arm. "Dad, please," she cried. "We didn't mean it like that. We were just stressed. We were scared." I looked down at her hands on my sleeve. "You called me a burden," I said quietly. "You calculated my worth while I sat in the next room." Her husband stepped forward, anger breaking through panic. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You can't just throw us out. We gave up our apartment to take care of you." "You moved in because you couldn't afford rent," I said, "and you stayed because you thought I was dying." His jaw clenched. "Well, contest the will," he threatened. "No sane father cuts off his own daughter." I smiled. "My lawyer disagrees." That's when fear replaced anger. My daughter looked up at me, tears streaking her face. "You changed the will," she said. "That's why those papers were on the counter." "Yes." "To your brother?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes." "What about me?" "You get $1,000, I replied evenly, "for reasons you already understand." She let out a broken sob. The truth finally landed. They hadn't been planning my future. They had been planning my exit. And now they were the ones being shown the door. The crying came next. Not quiet tears, not remorse. Panic. My daughter collapsed fully this time, her hands covering her face as her shoulders shook. Her husband stood frozen, eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an exit that no longer existed. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. I didn't mean any of it. I was overwhelmed. I was trying to do what was best." I didn't move. I had learned something important in the past few days. When people finally face consequences, they don't apologize for what they did. They apologize because they got caught. "You plan to erase me," I said calmly. "That wasn't a mistake. That was a strategy." Her husband snapped. "You're overreacting," he said sharply. "Families fight. People say things they don't mean." "You discussed falsifying medical records," I replied. "You priced nursing homes. You calculated my house value down to the dollar." He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, because there was nothing left to deny. My daughter looked up at me, desperation replacing tears. "I'll fix this," she said quickly. "I'll take care of you. I'll fire that doctor. Well, forget Whitefish. Well, stay here, I promise." I shook my head. "You're not sorry for what you planned," I said. "You're sorry it failed." That broke something in her. Her face hardened. The tears dried instantly. "Fine," she snapped, standing abruptly. "Then enjoy being alone. When you need help, don't call me." Her husband nodded in agreement, anger rising to the surface now that fear had run its course. "You think you've won?" he said. "You'll regret this. You'll end up exactly where we planned, alone." I looked at them both. "I was alone while you lived in my house and plotted against me," I said. At least now I'll have peace. That's when the insults started. Cold, bitter, revealing. She accused me of favoritism. He accused me of manipulation. They accused me of cruelty. Every word confirmed exactly who they were. I pointed toward the suitcases. "You have everything you brought into my home," I said. "That's more generosity than you showed me." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then reality finally settled in. They grabbed the luggage in silence. No apologies, no gratitude, no dignity. As they walked toward the door, my daughter turned back one last time. "You've lost your daughter today," she said. I met her eyes. "No," I replied. "I lost the illusion that I ever truly had one." The door closed behind them, and with it the last of their power. The house felt different after they left. Not empty, clean. For the first time in years, there were no whispered conversations behind closed doors, no footsteps pacing with impatience, no tension hanging in the air like an unpaid debt. Just silence. The good kind. I stood by the window and watched their car disappear down the street. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. That night I slept deeply. No pretending, no listening for danger, no calculating my own worth in someone else's ledger. The next morning I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table alone. The same table where I had signed checks for decades. The same table where I once believed love meant unlimited sacrifice. Now I understood the truth. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's permission. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt my life quietly. I reconnected with old friends. I updated my legal documents completely. I removed my daughter from every account, every emergency contact, every decision-making role. My son visited the following month with his children. The house filled with laughter again. Real laughter. Not the kind that hides calculation. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't expect anything. He just showed up. That's the difference. As for my daughter, I heard through others that things didn't go well. Without my house, without my money, without the safety net she always assumed would be there, reality arrived. And reality doesn't negotiate. Sometimes people ask if I regret it, if I miss her. I miss the daughter I thought I had, not the one she chose to become. I didn't seek revenge. I chose self-respect. I didn't destroy my family. I refused to be destroyed by entitlement. My hearing came back, but more importantly, my clarity did. And that silence they feared so much, it became my freedom.